So we want to focus a bit of time onto the whole concept of powerful questions. I think somebody's already said this. If there's one thing you take away from art of hosting, it is that questions are at the heart of any process. They're the fundamental engine that makes stuff work. A question is already an intervention into the system. The moment you ask a question, you've intervened in the system. So Jakob and I would like to invite you into a little bit of a time around questions. It's one of the most important skill sets, I think, for leadership. And it certainly is something that you can use at any moment, at any time, with any person. So even if you have no opportunity to do a whole big process, the question you ask might make a big difference to whoever you're with. So I wanted to show you, where's my question? I wanted to show you 3 powerful questions in my life as a demonstration on the fact that there's not a big science and woo-woo behind questions, but rather when and how and what the accentuation is can determine the power of the question. So here's a question I got when I was 16 from my mother. Do you want to meet Rob? Rob was the son of her colleague, and Rob had just come back from being an exchange student in Japan. This was the 70s. Nobody knew anything about Japan where I was from. So he told me stories of the strange culture, all the things he'd experienced, this dried fish and this thing called sushi. Nobody where I was from had ever heard of sushi. It was not the worldwide phenomenon that it is today. And he told me about all of this stuff, and then he said at the end to me kind of casually, don't worry, if you go to Japan, none of the clothes will fit you, but they'll build you something. But somehow, this story so intrigued me that it lit a fire in my heart. And I decided I wanted more than anything else in the world to become an exchange student. And so I went into the Rotary Exchange Program, which was the local option, and I kind of did the sell for why they should take me, and they said, you're too young. So for a whole nother year, I had to let this fire burn, and it didn't go away, so I knew it was true. And I became an exchange student in Germany. I was in Delmenhorst, for you Germans who are here, for a year. What? But it categorically set me on the trajectory of my life. This very simple question, do you want to meet Rob? So on the surface, it doesn't feel like a powerful question, but because my mother could see where I was at and somehow she intuited what I needed, this question was the most powerful question she could have asked me because it changed my life. Here's another one. Imagine me sitting in a hallway in a hotel in Philadelphia. The hotel is as boring as any other hotel has ever been. All the hallways look the same. Has anybody been in one of those hotel rooms? Oh. Okay. So I'm sitting there, and I'm actually waiting outside of the door because I'm about to go into an interview. And this woman sits down next to me. She says, oops, that's not it. She asked me, what are you doing? And I said to her, well, I'm sitting out here because I want to become part of the U.S. delegation to the International Congress of ISEC. And so she listened to me tell my story. She gave me some feedback. She went away. I went into the interview. I got onto the exchange team, and I never saw her again. I think of her in my life like this angel that popped up from I don't know where and asked me this very simple question, but that question totally focused me on what I needed to do in such a way that I was successful. Third one, you've already seen this question. So I'm at a party, I'm with my partner who I've tried to get rid of. Already, he didn't go. This other woman is listening, he's down the hallway talking. She listens very carefully. If you get me in the bar later, I'll tell you what she actually said first. And then she asked me, is this a relationship or is it an entanglement? This is a lightning question. In that moment, I was totally clear. Oh, bummer. I am in an entanglement. I was very clear, and I knew, actually, I'd already known before this, if I wanted clarity about this relationship, when I knew the answer, it would be totally clear. There wouldn't be confusion, there wouldn't be lots of emotion, it would just be clear. This question gave me total clarity in the moment. The next morning I said to him, it's over. And I was totally clear. So this question had this lightning rod quality that absolutely put me in there. So questions have the power to do that. If you don't do anything else but ask interesting questions, that's an interesting thing. I have a friend who coached people on executive recruitment. She had a guy who got a CEO position. She said to him, here's my advice to you. In the first week you're in your job, ask only one question. What's working around here? You recognize that as an appreciative inquiry question? Yeah. What's working around here? So he spent the whole week asking people what's working around here. He found out some really interesting stuff, but not only that, the grapevine in the company said, guess what? The new guy cares about what we think. Massive social capital. One question, right? If you see my suitcase, it has a question on the side of it, and it says, what question could change your life? Because I want my suitcase to be a portable public intervention. If people look at my suitcase, I see them looking at my suitcase, I want to go, there, you look. What's the answer? I had a woman write to me and said, I saw your suitcase in the train in Copenhagen, and that question changed my life. And I went, it does work! So questions are really, really powerful, and at the moment in the country, in the whole world, we have a very low question literacy. People are asking transactional questions instead of transformational questions. That's what I call the what's for dinner question. How much does it cost? Who's done it before? How did it work? Will we be successful? These are transactional questions, and they stop innovation happening because we get too worried about is it going to work before we've explored everything. So what is the transformational question that might make all the difference? And we were talking about the political structure, right, about how people are fighting each other. If you go into a political system where people are polarized and you ask them what's the solution here, you're going to get a fight and different opinions. If you ask them, what do you most care about here? Then you want to make sure we are keeping in line and in sight as we work on our issues together. You get a whole different orientation. So the question is an powerful thing. We want to talk to you about the hierarchy of questions, the words. We want to talk something about how you craft a question, and then we want to actually invite you into a little question cafe to craft and finesse a question with other people. And then we're going to end up with a little process where we're going to find out what's the resonance of our questions in the room. Are you up for it? Yeah, that was a question. Yay! I do want to say something about the why, because you kind of indicated it. Why is a really powerful thing, but it's confrontational. Let me demonstrate. Why don't you love me anymore? That might be, and maybe not the easiest question to answer, but that why has been given to every child under the age of 5. They will drive you nuts with this simple, and you can. That's why Professor Ishikawa did the 5 times why. You can learn a lot by asking why continuously, and it might be the more confrontational option. So it might be interesting to go, in what ways could we? If I actually, and this is all about the way you craft a question. So the power of a question is depending on what you wanted to do, number one. Often in Art of Hosting, we talk about powerful questions as the question that makes you tremble. You know, that one that takes you to the, that is an interesting thing because that question may travel with you over time long enough to open a doorway. So often when we're talking about powerful questions, we're talking about the question as a doorway, a possibility, an opening to a different perspective. So when we talk about powerful questions, that's what we're talking about, and it may mean any kind of shape. But there are 3 things which you need to consider when you're thinking about building a question. The first one of them is scope. What is this question directed to? Sometimes a question can sound huge if I have to own it personally. But maybe it's not so huge if the team is owning this, or it's an organizational question, or it's a question for our country. Where does this question really belong? And sometimes we're trying to work with questions that don't serve us because the scope is not quite right. So who is this question directed to and why? That's an interesting thing to think about. Secondly, our questions, by rights, usually have an assumption as part of them. Listen to this one. How can we compete with organization X, question mark? What's the assumption? Yeah, we have to compete. So that's kind of inherently baked into that question. And we're so often used to asking questions that we may not notice what assumption is built into them. So one thing we say in the Art of Hosting community, if you're going to use a question with any group, test it with them. See if it works. You know, the worst thing is to get into a World Cafe, be all excited, and then have the question fall so flat that everybody says, why are we here in this process? So we lost an opportunity to show the power to bring the community conversation together because we chose the wrong question. Which is why I often say I can tell Art of Hosting people because they're in the corner going, what's the question? So what is the assumption that might be built into your question? And testing your question with a few different people can be really interesting. Final thing is all about the construction of the question. How do you build this question? So how is an interesting question. In what ways, if I put in what ways, I'm telling my brain there's more than one way. Please find it. The brain loves a job, as those of you who are doing Collective Story Harvest with me know. When you focus it on something, it goes after that. So in what ways lets me know my brain could have more than one answer. There's not just one answer. So how do you construct a question? So I just want to very quickly check the time. Oh, look, one of my phones over there. And show you a very quick build. Those of you who've been in question stuff with me before will have seen this. Please bear with me. An opportunity to work with a group of young people wanting to do 5 simultaneous online sessions at the same time in New Zealand across 5 different centers called Youth Connect. So they said to me, please help us with Youth Connect. And of course, the first thing I did was ask a question, what's the purpose? And they said, well, the issue is that nobody listens to young people. They think we're tagging, they think we're a mess, they think we're a problem. So really the question is, why isn't anybody listening? I said, oh really, that's interesting. What do you think the solution to that is? What would really be helpful? And they said, we came up with this, how can we get young people a voice? It would be great if young people had a voice in everything that was going on. Okay, we're moving further along. So then we kind of said, but well, what do you really want to achieve with this group of stuff that you're doing, these 5 engagements? What do you want? And we came up with the question, what role could young people play? Fundamentally different already from why isn't anybody listening, right? We've moved into a whole different framework of what might be possible because of this question. And then me being me is my favorite question on the planet is, why are you really here in this place? What do you really want? And we came up with this, what contribution could young people be? That's kind of interesting. So we dug in a little bit further even, looking for deeper purpose. And at that point in time, I had a book my mother had given me called, What Are Old People For? So we said, what is a young person for? That's kind of interesting, right? Young people are here to provoke, to find new ways to do things, to bring energy, to be beautiful, so there's a whole bunch of stuff young people are actually here for. And so it took us about 2 hours, but we crafted this question in the end. What if New Zealand were a place where young people are an irresistible force for positive change? Do you see the fundamental difference between why isn't anybody listening? We intended this question to be a provocation. So in the New Zealand context, we called it, what if Aotearoa New Zealand, which is the proper name of New Zealand. New Zealand is a bilingual country. But some people are very annoyed that it would be called Aotearoa, so they didn't like that, so we put it in. I've taken it off because mostly in the world people don't know that. But anyway, we intended that to be a provocation. We asked, what if? What is the possibility here? Then, of course, we can ask about each part of this question, which is why it makes a powerful traveling question. Place. What place do we mean? Your place? My place? This city? This town? This nation? What place are we talking about? We could inquire into place. When we inquire into young people, what is a young person? In New Zealand law, a young person is age 6 to 25. But if you're part of the Maori culture, the indigenous culture, then you are the young person as long as there's anybody older than you in the room. If you're 75 and there's an 83-year-old, oh wow, you're the young person. This gives me hope. And irresistible force, what does that mean? There's plenty to play with that. We could inquire into that bit of it. And what does positive change mean? So the reason this question was powerful and has traveled with me ever since, because this has been years ago, I have to tell you, is because this question intrigues me and makes me curious and makes me see a possibility even now. Even now. So what question could you create for yourself that actually might show you a possibility well past this training? We want to give you a moment to craft a powerful question for yourself. What is your question right now? Given what you know here about crafting powerful questions, could you please, in the next minute, by the way, this does not have to be perfect. That's what you need to know. You're going to get some help in a moment. Please craft a question for yourself that you would like to take with you to dance with you for the next month from now. What's your question that makes you tremble? Please, can you write it on a piece of paper?